I was waiting for that old man to try something.
You didn't have to kill him.
I would have sooner or later.
Funny thing about Chink there.
Released in 1957, The Tall T looked like a modest western. Small cast, short runtime, desert locations. But beneath that stripped-down surface was something colder, smarter, and far more dangerous than audiences expected. This was a western where the villain didn't rant, the hero didn't brag, and every pause meant something. It turned Randolph Scott into a study of quiet morality. It transformed Richard Boone into one of the most unsettling outlaws of the decade. And it proved that a western could feel like a psychological thriller long before that label existed. These are the first 10 weird facts about The Tall T, no filler, no myths, just the strange truths hiding in the dust. And once this ride starts, it never lets up. Number 1. The Tall T was built from leftovers. Not scraps, not throwaways. Something stranger than that. A story already pared down to its barest bones, then sharpened again. The Tall T was adapted from an Elmore Leonard short story called The Captives, a piece of fiction so lean it almost dared Hollywood to ruin it. At the time, Leonard was not yet the legendary crime novelist whose name would later define an entire style of American storytelling. He was still carving out space for himself, writing westerns that quietly rejected spectacle. His stories were not about gunfights or grand moral victories. They were about pressure, about what happens when ordinary people are trapped in close quarters with dangerous men and must survive using conversation, intuition, and restraint. The Tall T preserved nearly everything that mattered from Leonard's original story: the limited locations, the small cast, the hostage dynamic, the quiet, tense exchanges where no one raises their voice, yet every word feels loaded with threat. What changed was not the core, but the discipline. Hollywood had a habit of inflating material like this. More characters, louder conflicts, bigger action beats. But director Bud Boticher did something radical. He stripped the story even further. He removed anything that distracted from the central tension. No elaborate backstories, no romantic subplots, no padding. What remained was a western that felt almost alien for its time. Sparse, controlled, modern, almost European in its restraint. Audiences in 1957 didn't realize it, but they were watching the DNA of future crime films being smuggled into a frontier setting. This wasn't a western built on myth or nostalgia. It was built on tension, silence, and moral ambiguity, and that made it quietly revolutionary. Number 2. Randolph Scott almost didn't make this movie. By 1957, Randolph Scott was approaching what many assumed would be the quiet end of his career. He had already starred in dozens of westerns, many of them reliable, conventional, and forgettable. To studios, Scott represented safety, predictability, a familiar face audiences trusted, but rarely questioned. That reputation almost cost him the Tall T Columbia. Pictures wanted a bigger name, someone flashier, someone who could sell the action and dominate the screen. But Bud Boticher fought for Scott with surprising intensity. He didn't want volume, he wanted stillness. Scott didn't command scenes by force, he inhabited them. He understood how to let silence speak. In The Tall T, his character Pat Brennan isn't a mythic gunslinger or a legendary lawman. He's a man who watches, listens, and understands people. Scott played him with an economy that most actors of the era avoided. No speeches, no bravado, just presence. The strange part is that Scott himself didn't see the role as special. He approached it like another assignment, another western, another paycheck. He had no sense that this performance would later be regarded as one of the most psychologically rich of his career. Critics eventually recognized what Scott never claimed, that Brennan survives not because he's the fastest or the strongest, but because he understands human behavior. Scott didn't realize it at the time, but The Tall T would help redefine his legacy. Not as a genre workhorse, but as a quiet moral center in a collapsing world. Number 3. Richard Boone's villain terrified people without raising his voice. Frank Usher does not shout. He does not sneer. He does not announce his cruelty. And that is precisely why he is terrifying. Richard Boone played the outlaw leader with calm intelligence and unsettling politeness. He smiles when he speaks. He explains himself. He sounds almost reasonable. This was not accidental. Boone and Bowditcher made a conscious decision to reject the traditional Western villain. They believed the most dangerous men rarely look dangerous. They disarm you with civility before revealing their capacity for violence. Boone reportedly studied real criminals and noticed something disturbing. The ones who frightened him most were not explosive or erratic. They were thoughtful, rational. They justified everything. Frank Usher does not see himself as evil. He sees himself as practical. Violence is simply a tool, necessary, efficient. Boone delivered this philosophy with surgical restraint. The weird reaction came from audiences. Western villains were supposed to be obvious, loud, sweaty, cruel on the surface. Usher was none of those things. Some viewers even found themselves sympathizing with him, which made studio executives deeply uncomfortable. But Bowditcher refused to soften the character. He wanted audiences to confront how persuasive evil can be. Decades later, Boone's performance would be cited as a blueprint for modern antagonists. Villains who scare you not because they rage, but because they make sense. And once they do, escape becomes almost impossible. Number 4. The Tall T was shot like a hostage thriller, not a Western. Most Westerns of the 1950s celebrated space, vast horizons, endless skies, riders silhouetted against freedom itself. The Tall T does the opposite. The desert feels tight, confining. Rocks press inward. The camera lingers on faces instead of landscapes. Bud Bowditcher frames scenes to emphasize enclosure even in open terrain. Characters are boxed in by boulders, wagons, and doorways. The effect is subtle, but relentless. You never forget that escape is unlikely. This visual strategy mirrors the story's emotional reality. Brennan and the others are not always tied up, but they are psychologically trapped. Every conversation becomes a negotiation. Every glance carries risk. What makes this strange is how intentional it was. Bowditcher worked closely with cinematographer Charles Lawton Jr. to avoid romantic imagery. He didn't want the West to feel liberating. He wanted it to feel indifferent, beautiful but uncaring. Some audiences were confused. Where were the grand vistas? Where was the spectacle? But this restraint is exactly why the film still feels tense today. It refuses the comfort of genre tradition. Instead, it turns the open frontier into a pressure chamber. Number 5. The entire film runs barely over 70 minutes. In an era when studios padded runtimes to justify ticket prices, The Tall T did something almost defiant. It moved quickly, ruthlessly. There is no excess, no filler scenes. Every moment either deepens character or tightens tension. This pacing was deliberate. Bowditcher believed suspense evaporated when stories lingered too long. He wanted the audience to feel like events were unfolding just ahead of them, impossible to catch up to. One mistake, one wrong word, and everything collapses. Some theater owners complained. They worried audiences would feel cheated by the short runtime. But viewers didn't leave dissatisfied. They left unsettled. The ending arrives with startling speed. No victory lap. No prolonged resolution. Just consequence, then silence. That structural boldness would later influence neo-westerns and crime thrillers alike. It proved that tension doesn't require length. It requires precision. And The Tall T never wastes a second. Number 6. Maureen O'Sullivan's character was deliberately underwritten. This may at first seem like a flaw, but it was a highly deliberate choice by Bud Bowditcher. Maureen O'Sullivan portrays Doretta Mims, a woman caught in the tense standoff at the heart of The Tall T. Unlike many female characters in contemporary westerns, she isn't given long speeches, dramatic confessions, or expository dialogue to explain her thoughts and feelings. Instead, she reacts. She observes, she listens, she endures. Bowditcher believed that over-explaining a character, particularly in a hostage scenario, would undermine the realism he sought to capture. In actual situations like this, people do not perform for the camera or for anyone else. They survive. O'Sullivan brought this philosophy to life with a performance marked by quiet, controlled fear, an intensity that feels unnervingly authentic even today. There is no hysterical crying, no melodramatic declarations of terror, only the disciplined, taut tension of someone forced to remain calm under extreme duress. What makes this approach feel strikingly modern is how it avoids reducing Doretta to a symbol or plot device. Many westerns of the era treated women as prizes, motivators, or moral foils for the hero. Doretta is none of these. She is simply a person caught in the middle of events beyond her control, forced to navigate the shifting power dynamics of dangerous men. Her silence is not emptiness or passivity. It is awareness. Every pause, every measured reaction carries weight. The audience can feel the tension radiating from her, and it makes every interaction, particularly those with Frank Usher, that much more potent. When Usher speaks to her in calm, reasoned tones, the effect is chilling precisely because of Doretta's composure. She knows the extent of his capacity for violence, and the audience shares that knowledge. Her restrained responses heighten the suspense and make the danger feel immediate and intimate. By trusting the viewer to understand her situation without overt explanation, Boetticher and O'Sullivan created a performance that remains quietly revolutionary. Doretta's intelligence, awareness, and resilience emerge not through words, but through subtle behavior, making her one of the most compelling and realistically rendered female characters in mid-20th century Western cinema.
Yes. Yes, I did.
Just means you're alive.
Number 7. Bud Boetticher considered this his purest film. Bud Boetticher directed several westerns with Randolph Scott, films that would later be grouped together as the Ranun cycle. But among all of them, Boetticher repeatedly pointed to the tall T as the moment where everything finally clicked into place. Not because it had the biggest budget or the widest reach, but because it left him nowhere to hide. Financial limitations stripped the production down to its essentials. There was no money for indulgence, no space for decorative scenes or unnecessary flourishes. Every choice had to earn its place. Every moment had to serve the story, or be removed entirely. Boetticher believed that restrictions were not obstacles, but tools. They forced honesty. If a scene didn't work, you couldn't distract the audience with spectacle or technical bravado. You either solved the problem or cut the scene altogether. That mindset stood in direct opposition to the studio system of the time, which favored excess coverage, alternate takes, and narrative safety nets. Studios wanted options. Boetticher wanted commitment. He believed a film should move forward with a single vision and a consistent tone, even if that meant taking risks. The tall T embodies that discipline in every frame. It never hesitates or over-explains. It doesn't soften its edges to reassure the audience. It trusts its own rhythm and follows it without apology. In a genre built on repetition and familiar formulas, that confidence was unusual. Boetticher wasn't interested in reinventing the Western through spectacle. He wanted to refine it until only what mattered remained. That refusal to posture, to announce its importance, is precisely what gives the film its lasting power. It feels timeless, not because it aims for greatness, but because it commits fully to clarity. Number 8. Elmore Leonard hated most Western adaptations. He loved this one. Elmore Leonard was notoriously critical of Hollywood adaptations. He often complained that studios misinterpreted his work, diluted his dialogue, and inserted unnecessary action that diluted the tension he carefully built on the page. Leonard's writing thrived on subtlety, moral ambiguity, and the quiet power struggles between characters, and most filmmakers failed to capture that. The tall T, however, was a rare exception. From the very first scenes, it honored the rhythm of his prose, the careful timing of conversation, and his fascination with criminals who over-explain and heroes who watch and listen. Leonard later praised the film for capturing the essence of his writing, a remarkable achievement considering it was his first adaptation to reach the screen. What makes this so fascinating is how understated Leonard's influence is. At first glance, the film doesn't present itself as literary. There are no overt nods to the short story or the author's voice. Yet, once you start noticing the patterns, the pauses between lines, the deliberate silences, the subtle shifts in dominance between characters, you realize the film is saturated with Leonard's style. Dialogue becomes more than just conversation. It is a weapon, a tool, and a source of tension. Every line matters, and every reaction reveals character. The film doesn't explain, justify, or moralize. It trusts the audience to understand the stakes through observation, just as Leonard's writing does. In translating Leonard's work, The Tall T did more than adapt a plot. It captured a voice. It maintained the author's focus on human psychology, on how ordinary people navigate extraordinary danger, and on how communication, what is said, what is withheld, can be as deadly as a gun. That balance of fidelity and cinematic innovation makes the film a quietly brilliant example of adaptation, proving that honoring an author's voice can create tension, depth, and timeless storytelling. Number 9. The final showdown is almost an afterthought. In most Westerns, the climax defines the film. The duel, the showdown, the test of skill. In The Tall T, the ending feels subdued, almost inevitable. The real battle happened earlier, in conversation, in observation. Brennan wins because he understands Usher's psychology. By the time violence occurs, it feels like failure, not triumph. Boetticher believed violence was not heroic. It was what happened when communication collapsed. This inversion confused some viewers, but thrilled critics. It suggested a new Western language, one where intelligence mattered more than speed, where survival required empathy. That idea would echo across decades of cinema. Number 10. The Tall T quietly changed the Western forever. It didn't change the Western with spectacle. There were no record-breaking ticket sales, no awards campaigns, no grand declarations announcing that the genre had been reinvented. The Tall T worked in a quieter, more unsettling way. It showed what the Western could become once the mythology was stripped away. No invincible heroes riding in with destiny on their side. No villains twirling mustaches or announcing their cruelty. Just people placed under unbearable pressure, forced to make decisions they could never undo. Survival wasn't about righteousness or speed. It was about judgment, about reading the room, about understanding human nature before it turned lethal. Filmmakers noticed, even if audiences didn't fully realize what they were seeing at the time. Critics picked up on the shift as well. Something had changed. The frontier was no longer a stage for legend. It had become a psychological landscape, a place where danger didn't roar or charge straight ahead. It waited, it spoke softly, it smiled. And that idea quietly rewired the genre from the inside out. You can see the fingerprints of the Tall T years later in darker, more introspective westerns like High Plains Drifter, where morality is unstable and violence feels corrosive rather than heroic. You can see it in No Country for Old Men, a film that removes the comfort of justice entirely and replaces it with inevitability. You can even feel its influence in modern thrillers that have nothing to do with horses or deserts. Stories where tension lives in silence and the most frightening characters are the calmest ones in the room. That legacy didn't come from shouting its importance. The Tall T never demanded attention. It trusted the audience to sense the shift, to feel the weight of its restraint. And that is why it endures. Decades later, its influence still moves through cinema, the same way it always did, quietly, patiently, and impossibly hard to ignore once you've heard it. Number 11. The Tall T reused locations audiences thought they understood, then betrayed that familiarity. At first glance, the landscapes in The Tall T appear ordinary. Wide desert plains, rocky outcrops, endless sky stretching toward the horizon. To a casual viewer, it looks like just another slice of the American West, interchangeable with dozens of other westerns released before it. And in a literal sense, it was. Many of the locations had already been used repeatedly in earlier films, most of them shot to evoke freedom, adventure, and possibility. These were places where the land itself felt like an ally, where wide open spaces symbolized escape, independence, and the promise of movement. But Bud Boetticher understood something few directors of his era truly grasped. Audiences carry emotional memory even when they don't consciously recognize it. A place seen before brings with it expectations, comfort, familiar rhythm. Boetticher didn't fight that recognition. He exploited it. He returned to those same landscapes and drained them of reassurance. The same rocks that once framed heroic riders were repositioned to hem characters in. Trails became funnels. Open plains became killing fields where hiding was impossible. Crew members later recalled that Boetticher treated geography as an active character. He spent hours walking locations alone, studying how bodies appeared against the horizon, where silhouettes became targets, where echoes traveled too far. He searched for angles that flattened space, turning openness into exposure. He wanted characters visually trapped, not by walls, but by emptiness. The strange effect was psychological. Viewers felt uneasy without knowing why. The land looked familiar, yet it behaved differently. Instead of offering escape, it threatened visibility. Instead of safety, it promised consequence. Boetticher understood that geography tells a story, whether the script acknowledges it or not. By reusing familiar terrain and rewriting its emotional meaning, the Tall T trained audiences to feel danger where they once felt comfort. The land becomes an antagonist, silent, unmovable, indifferent to intention, and utterly uninterested in mercy. Number 12. The Tall T presents money as a corrosive force that accelerates human failure. Most Westerns build their conflicts around land disputes, personal revenge, or the abstract idea of justice. The Tall T does something far colder. It builds its tension around money. Specifically, the ransom Frank Usher believes will resolve everything. From the moment money enters the narrative, it begins altering behavior, not dramatically at first, subtly. Usher grows sharper, more impatient. His partners grow careless, emboldened by the promise of reward. Even Pat Brennan, who tries to remain detached, understands that money changes how men think. Boetticher believed greed was cinema's most honest motivator because it required no myth, no ideology, no moral disguise, just desire. And desire, once awakened, never stays contained. What makes this portrayal unsettling is how little the film explains it. No character delivers a sermon on greed. No dialogue frames money as evil. The poison simply spreads. Usher begins as calm, rational, almost philosophical. But the closer he gets to the payout, the more his logic frays. Anticipation erodes judgment. Confidence becomes arrogance. Brennan recognizes this and does something crucial. He waits. He doesn't challenge Usher directly. He allows money to magnify every weakness. This approach was deeply unromantic for the genre. Western outlaws were often portrayed as rebels or freedom seekers. In The Tall T, crime is transactional, procedural, ultimately empty. Guns are tools, not symbols. Money is the real weapon. And the closer Usher comes to it, the more it betrays him. This quiet cynicism would later become foundational to crime cinema. But here it arrives early, stripped of spectacle. The film suggests greed doesn't merely motivate violence, it accelerates collapse. Number 13. The Tall T refuses to explain its hero, and that refusal becomes its philosophy. Pat Brennan enters the film already complete. There are no flashbacks, no tragic backstory, no explanation for his moral compass. He doesn't speak about his past, and the film never asks him to. This absence was intentional. Boetticher believed that backstory weakened tension. The more you know about where a character comes from, the easier it becomes to predict where they're going. Brennan's morality isn't justified through trauma or ideology. It's revealed through action, through restraint, through timing. He speaks only when necessary. He listens more than he talks. He doesn't announce heroism. He performs it quietly. Studio executives worried audiences wouldn't connect without emotional exposition. Boetticher disagreed. He believed consistency mattered more than explanation. Brennan behaves the same under pressure as he does in Calm, observant, patient, measured. The weird thing is how modern this feels. In an era obsessed with psychological justification, The Tall T argues something radical. That character can be defined entirely in the present. That who you are is what you do when circumstances remove the luxury of explanation. Brennan's past doesn't matter because the situation doesn't allow room for reflection, only choice. That restraint gives the film an almost philosophical clarity. It treats morality as behavior rather than identity. And that makes every decision Brennan makes feel earned rather than excused. Number 14. The villains doom themselves by speaking too freely. One of the most unsettling dynamics in The Tall T is how openly the criminals argue among themselves. Frank Usher, Chink, and their younger accomplice don't hide their disagreements. They criticize each other's decisions. They question authority. They expose resentment in front of their captives. Boetticher staged these scenes with deliberate precision. He wanted the audience to understand that the real instability wasn't the hostages. It was the gang. In Bowdisher's worldview, criminals collapse from within long before the law ever arrives. The hostages are quiet because silence keeps them alive. The outlaws talk because they cannot stop asserting dominance. That reversal creates tension without action. Every argument widens the fracture. Every insult weakens cohesion. Brennan listens. He learns. He allows them to reveal their own vulnerabilities. This dynamic mirrors real power structures. Those who truly control a situation speak less. Those afraid of losing control speak constantly. The brilliance lies in how dialogue replaces violence. Each exchange pushes the group closer to collapse. By the time violence erupts, it feels inevitable. Not because Brennan overpowers them, but because the gang has already destroyed itself. The film suggests ego, not opposition, is the most reliable destroyer of criminal groups. Silence, once again, proves to be the safest weapon.
Do you know who she is? No, boo.
Number 15. The Tall T uses silence to deny emotional comfort. Western audiences were conditioned to expect music, sweeping themes for heroism, dark cues for danger. The Tall T strips much of that away. Long stretches play with almost no score at all. Wind replaces strings. Footsteps replace percussion. Horses shifting weight replace rhythm. Boetticher believed music told audiences how to feel, and he didn't want that guidance. He wanted unease. Silence forces attention. It magnifies every sound. It stretches every pause. Composer Heinz Rohmheld's score appears sparingly, almost reluctantly. When it does surface, it underscores consequence rather than action. This absence unsettled audiences in 1957. Without musical reassurance, scenes feel exposed. Ordinary moments become tense simply because nothing fills the space. A glance lasts longer. A pause feels dangerous. Modern thrillers rely heavily on this technique, but the Tall T used it when the genre was still loud. Silence becomes a pressure chamber, and when violence finally breaks it, the impact feels harsher. Not because it's louder, but because the film has denied emotional preparation. It has been whispering the entire time. Number 16. The Tall T redefines strength as patience under pressure. Pat Brennan survives not by speed, but by restraint. He waits. He watches. He allows others to expose themselves. The film frames patience as a form of physical strength. Brennan understands timing. He understands people. Frank Usher, by contrast, is intelligent but impatient. He believes foresight equals victory. That belief blinds him. Bowditcher structured the story, so intelligence alone isn't enough. It must be paired with humility. Brennan knows what he doesn't know. Usher never questions himself. Visually, the film reinforces this contrast. Brennan is often still. Usher paces, gestures, talks. The calmer man controls the environment. This philosophy ran counter to Western mythology, which celebrated speed and dominance. The Tall T argues the opposite. Restraint is power. Observation is survival. No dialogue explains this. The outcome does. Brennan lives because he understands when not to act. In a genre obsessed with motion, that stillness was revolutionary. Number 17. The Tall T makes violence feel like an admission of failure. When violence erupts in the Tall T, it is sudden and unsatisfying. There is no choreography, no dramatic buildup. Boetticher believed violence should feel abrupt and disappointing, a last resort, not a reward. The film refuses to romanticize gunplay. Death is quick. The camera does not linger. Life ends, and the story moves on. This restraint reinforces the film's moral stance. Violence is not triumph. It is consequence. By denying spectacle, the film denies pleasure. You don't cheer, you brace. At a time when Western shootouts were treated as highlights, this approach unsettled audiences. Violence becomes punctuation, periods at the end of sentences already written. Critics later praised this realism, noting how it gave the film moral weight without speeches. Decades later, filmmakers would echo this lesson. That restraint amplifies impact, because when nothing is exaggerated, everything feels real. Number 18. The tall T quietly dismantles traditional masculinity. On the surface, the film appears conventionally masculine: guns, horses, tough men. But beneath that surface, it questions those ideals. Frank Usher equates strength with domination and fear. Pat Brennan embodies something else entirely: listening, empathy, patience. Brennan survives because he understands people, not because he intimidates them. This contrast is never announced. It is demonstrated through consequence. Usher mocks restraint as weakness. Brennan proves otherwise. The film offers no speeches about masculinity, no explicit challenge, just outcomes. The man who rules through fear loses control. The man who listens gains leverage. For 1957, this was quietly radical. Westerns often reinforced rigid masculine codes. The tall T loosens them. It suggests courage doesn't require cruelty. Strength doesn't require domination. Intelligence can outlast brutality. These ideas endure because they are embedded in story, not ideology. They are lived, not explained. Number 19. The tall T influenced entire genres without announcing itself. Though firmly a Western, the tall T quietly shaped storytelling far beyond its genre. Its structure migrated into crime films, thrillers, and even science fiction. Small groups under pressure, confined environments, psychological tension, moral ambiguity, dialogue-driven danger. You can see its DNA in hostage dramas, noir thrillers, and minimalist action films. Its influence is often invisible because it was absorbed rather than copied. Calm villains, thinking heroes, scenes where danger exists in silence rather than spectacle. That is, the tall T. It did not create a movement, it planted seeds, and those seeds grew slowly across decades. Many filmmakers learned its lessons without ever knowing its name. That quiet diffusion is the mark of true influence, not imitation, integration. Number 20. The tall T ends without triumph, and that refusal defines its legacy. When the tall T ends, there is no celebration, no swelling score. Brennan survives, others do not. Life continues. The ending feels subdued, almost unresolved. That was deliberate. Boetticher did not want catharsis. He wanted reflection. Survival is not glorious. It is survival. The film leaves the audience with unanswered tension, with awareness of how close everything came to ending differently. That restraint confused some viewers, but cemented the film's reputation among critics and filmmakers. The tall T trusts its audience to accept ambiguity, to understand that not every story ends in victory. Sometimes it ends in endurance. That philosophy is why the film remains powerful. It does not demand applause, it earns respect. And in doing so, it remains one of the most quietly influential Westerns ever made.